Hello, welcome to another episode of the Liberated Women podcast. I'm really excited because today I have another wonderful guest. Her name is Charlotte. She's a holistic relationship coach, single mum who has transitioned from education to empowering women to raise their confidence, self-worth, and come home to themselves so they can live a life that they truly deserve, which is very much online with my mission too, of forging your path to wild liberation so that you can truly remember who you are and come back into your wholeness and your wildness and your primal self. So, Charlotte, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here at last. Yeah, I'm really excited for today.
Yes, very exciting. And you were a teacher, is that right? Maybe share your story of, where you started in your journey, in your career, and how it's transitioned into what you do now. And I think it's really interesting that we both have worked as teachers in our lifetime. And actually, I find a
Yeah.
lot of teachers leave the teaching profession and go into this kind of work. So I always find it fascinating when teachers leave and choose another path. So share your story with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny because I feel like I've kind of come full circle around. So if I go back to even before I was teaching, I actually had a huge passion for psychology. Like I did psychology A level, I did psychology degree, like absolutely loved it. And at the time, I was in a really serious relationship when I finished my degree. And rather than probably what I should have done was follow the weave of like psychology, I went into education. His mum at the time was a teacher, and I was like, I don't know what to do. Oh, it's easy. He very much wanted to settle down, etc. So that's kind of the line I went with. And then I got to a point I was like, this isn't what I wanted, and that relationship ended. So I ended up being in education for 14 years. And the last 6 of them, I was actually teaching internationally, a big international school in Thailand. And it was during that time that the pandemic was happening and my marriage broke down. And I was like, right, I'm doing this full time job at a very prestigious school. I've got a young 20-month-old daughter. There's lots of unhealthy things happening here, and I can't do what I've done previously. Like previously, my 20s had a breakup. It was like, I'm going to hide in bed for as long as I possibly can. I'm going to cry my eyes out. I feel like the world is ended, everything's shattered down. I was like, I can't do this time. I've got a little girl who needs me, and I want to do things differently. And it was like, I kind of almost like probably just prayed to the universe. At that point, I wouldn't have said I was really spiritual at all. But I think in that, I kind of sent a prayer almost to the universe, like, show me a way. Show me a way that's not like what I had before. And it was then that I came across a breakup coach online. And she was just sharing certain things. And I was like, oh my goodness, like, why have I not heard these words before? Like, just that sentence she just shared has just shifted everything. And one of the things that really resonated with me so much was she was like, this isn't happening to you, it's happening for you. And I was like, oh my goodness, like that just shifted so much. And I was like, I'd always say to her, like, well, how is this happening for me? And I just like to shift everything. And then in that, I came across a coaching company. I got trained. I went into coaching really heavily and kind of went back into my psychology roots of trained in as an accredited coach. I did an NLP master practitioner qualification as well for 6 months. I did holistic coaching, little bits of like Reiki in there, little bits of breath work, etc. And that kind of kick-started my journey. And initially, I started helping people with their breakups and showing them a different way to navigate that breakup, which is so much more empowering. But not only that, I then started to get into the space of the subconscious and the patterns that are playing out in our lives, which I didn't realize. That friend with like, oh, I'm always in these kinds of relationships. I'm always in a relationship where I get cheated on. I'm always in a relationship where, the man can't express his emotions, or I'm always in this relationship where this is happening. And I was like, these things aren't accidental. And when I got into it, I was like, wow, this is incredible. Like the things I'm uncovering. And I also uncovered a lot about myself just through doing my NLP training. I was like, this is really powerful. Like, what if I could not only help people to get over their breakup, but also to completely shatter all their patterns, heal parts of themselves, and then allow themselves to actually go, this is what I get to have instead. I get to have a relationship at this kind of level. I actually get to really love myself again. I get to get rid of all the conditioning that's told me that I'm this, I'm that, I'm not good enough, this is all I'm worthy of. What if it gets to be so much more than just getting somebody over a breakup?
Mm. Yeah, I love that. And I think it's always the case that when we come to do this kind of work, whether you're a healer or a coach or a shaman or a breathwork facilitator, ancestral healer, you know, all of these different NLP, whatever it is that you're trained in, or the gifts that you are bringing forth to the world, it usually is because of your own lived experience of something that you've been through.
Yeah.
And Charlotte and I are actually, we've never met until today. We met in real life just before we were recording this podcast. She's been in my Sacred Sisterhood WhatsApp group for a long time, and actually we discovered she lives 2 minutes down the road from me. We've only ever connected online, and so we went for a walk this morning and we had a lot of conversations, and we thought, oh, we should have recorded the podcast as we were talking, because loads of juicy topics came through as we were walking in the sunshine, about, you know, this idea of the what if, and how you can only take people as far as deep as you've taken yourself. And I think this is an ever evolving journey. And, you know, I think you mentioned, Charlotte, earlier that you said, well, how can I be a relationship coach if I'm not in a relationship? But it's like, well, it doesn't matter, because what you then said to me was really powerful, because you said, well, I've been through the breakup, I held myself through that, and I've done all the work, or I'm doing the work to call in the person that I do desire, because I've done the work. And so, you know, we spoke about like embodying the walk and talking the talk, and I think people expect us to have already figured it all out, and actually we're still walking that path. And that's the brave and courageous thing to do, and the vulnerable thing to do. And actually, I would rather work with someone who's on the path to where they want to go to, because that means that they haven't, that they're living it in real time. And that way they're just those steps further than I am to take me to where I want to go to. And I always say that to my clients too. So I think that's really, really interesting that that's the conversation that kind of came up earlier as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, in that, when I do coach clients, like, I share things, and like, that perspective is just amazing for my relationship, or, you know, in dating, and just that empowerment. I've had clients where they've gone through a breakup and their initial story is, I'm never going to meet anyone like my ex. I'm never going to get better than this. Like, they were a really unique person. I'm a really unique person. Like, it's going to be so hard to meet someone. And then just through exploring that possibility of what if, suddenly, person appears in their life and they're like, oh my goodness, like, how, I didn't think it could be this good. Because that shift, that level up, because we've just shattered like that, you know, perspective. And sometimes when you don't have certain things in your life, it's because you're holding a standard that's up here. And it's like, I'm not going to accept anything less. I love myself so much. And that's been one of my journeys, is just in dating, of saying no repeatedly and being okay to let something go, where old me is like, oh, I want to cling on to this, because old me is like, oh, this is as good as it can get. And then that shift of like what I'm embodying is like, no, it gets to be better. And I can say no. And by saying no, I'm choosing myself more.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like that self-abandonment piece, isn't it? And I think, I know we're specifically talking here about heartbreaks and breakups and dating and relationships, but I think this applies to every aspect of our lives, right? Like you saying no to staying in a teaching system. You know, you've been a teacher for 14 years. I was a teacher for 16 years. And like, you get institutionalized in a way, and you get comfortable, because you're like, well, I've got this regular salary and it's safe, and I'm still kind of doing some good in the world, even if I've outgrown it and it doesn't feel right for me anymore, and I've evolved beyond this, and I don't believe in the system and the values and the morals and all, you know, all of that. And yet it takes so much courage to say no, and to lovingly let those parts of your identity go. And there's a grief that comes within that, in any kind of breakup, whether it's, I guess, you know, a breakup with a partner, a breakup with an identity that's related to a job or a career or a title, a breakup with an area or a place that you've lived in for a long time, an attachment to a house, an attachment to anything that you felt comfortable and you've got used to, because we love comfort. Humans, we love comfort. We love that sense of like ease, and, you know, feels safe in my nervous system. And suddenly our soul outgrows it. And it's like, I always liken it to like our higher self. Or our higher self is way ahead of us. It already knows where we're supposed to go. And our human self is just catching that up with that. And having the courage and the bravery to say no is so huge, because many people don't live, and we were talking about this earlier, in the energy of the but what if, right? We kind of live more in the like, yeah, but what if, but what if, but what if it doesn't work out, but what if he, but what if they, but what if I, and instead of being like, yeah, but what if it's the
Yeah.
best thing that could ever happen to me in my whole entire life? Like,
Yeah.
what if, like, what kind of
Yeah.
magic could that be? Like, what? Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. We limit ourselves by so much by saying like, but this is as good as it can get, so I'm going to settle for this. Like, I'm going to get a better job than this. I'm not going to have a better house than this. I'm not going to have a better relationship than this. Like this person I'm dating right now, like that's probably as good as it's going to get. Like they're ticking a few boxes. Like I'll go for it. And it's like no, it gets to be so much more when you decide that it's going to be so much more, and it is energetically say no to certain things. Like this person I'm dating is so great in so many ways. This is the thing I had. All the guys I dated last year have been incredible guys. You know, there's not been one of them I can go, actually, you're, you know, and been like, you're this or you're that. I'm like, you're an incredible guy, but there's been something missing with each one. And it's so easy to kind of go, yeah, but I'm just going to hold on to that because all of these things are great. But it's like energetically, like, you know, like it can be more. And it's like, it's so hard because it's so comfortable. This is what I've known. And it's a no. And just like being kind of okay with releasing that, because then it's like, what do you get to let in instead? What comes next? I'm a big believer the universe will keep sending us certain people, events, situations, circumstances to teach us a lesson, and it will keep repeating it until you're like, okay, this is the lesson. This is the shift I need to make. This is the healing I need to do. This is a trigger that keeps coming up for me. This is the next edge I need to work through. And I need to kind of learn to be okay with this and just push through like that edge. And when you do it, it's like, something new is now coming in, and that might have lessons with it, and like that's okay. But it's like that level up, like you're constantly upgrading and leveling up what you're calling in and bringing in. But it's so scary because our nervous system loves familiarity,
Yeah, absolutely.
even if it's not good for us.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people end up staying in that complacency and end up staying and settling because they think that's all there is. And, you know, every country, and like you, I worked abroad as a teacher in 2 different countries. And every country that I've lived in has their own version of like, well, that's just how it is. You know, they all have their own phrases in their own language that basically sums up to, well, that's just how it is. Like, deal with it, you know, live with it. That's just how it is here. That's just how life is. Rather than allowing the magic of the what if and the possibilities. And, you know, we were talking about this earlier when we were out for our walk about, I remember you saying, but what if you could have this and I can have this? So like, you know, I can be financially successful and have a partner that is devoted and committed and loving and all the things I want. And I was like, yeah, and what if you could also have the other? Like, what, there's more than just a binary option of like this and this. What are infinite options and possibilities that we can't necessarily see because of exactly what you mentioned before, the conditioning, past relationships, previous experiences. And actually what I found in my relationships, this is something that's very interesting, actually. Maybe you'll have something that you can kind of coach me around on this. You do a bit of live coaching for me on this podcast. But so one of the core beliefs that I grew up with from my mother, I'm trying to really forgive her for this because I think she only said this, you know, from her lived experience, and I love Mum very much. So Mum, if you're listening to this, I do love you. But I don't know if she listens to my podcast, to be honest, but one of the things that I grew up with was this phrase. My mum would always say to me, if your dad ever left me, I'd be absolutely fine. I've got my career, I've got my friends, I've got my hobbies. I'm an independent woman. I would be absolutely fine. If I was to leave your dad, he would crumble. That's what she used to say to me. The subtext behind that, and I've never forgotten it because she said it to me several times throughout my life, okay? And I always saw my dad, again, love you, Dad. You're never going to listen to this podcast, but I love you even if you do hear this. My dad, I always saw him as a very weak man. Not physically weak, but didn't really stand in his boundaries. Adored my mum, kind of puppy dogged my mum, followed my mum around. She was always the one with the like ideas and the decisions, and he would just kind of follow her around. And he was a man in his own right in terms of his business and everything, but definitely like she was the kind of the leader of the situation. Okay. Still
Yeah.
is very much that way. And so I already had this kind of like sense that my dad was quite weak and like wouldn't protect. And I had my own journey with him not
Yeah.
protecting me through situations. So the underlying subtext behind that was like, men are weak and men are useless. And I don't
Yeah.
really need a man in order for me to survive. So I, like my mum, I became very hyper independent, right? Lived very much in my masculine, always had a very
Mm.
successful career, like always had financial backing, made sure that like I was always okay, sorted, put myself
Yeah.
out there, had a good social life, blah, 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 blah. And with that, I would attract men that I perceived to be very weak and
Yeah.
probably quite useless. And I
Yeah.
hate to use that word because that's so emasculating to
Mm.
a man, but I would subconsciously attract that so that if something was to go wrong and we would break up, like my mum, I'll be fine. I've got my this, I've got my that, and I'm okay and I'm independent. And actually, it's been so detrimental,
Yeah.
my relationship patterns, because then I just kept dating my dad over and over again, right? Like versions of my dad, which we tend to do
Yeah.
anyway, right? Like
Yeah.
either we do a version of our mum or our dad until we heal those parts.
Yeah.
Or in between those guys, I would meet these really wildly independent, wealthy men who had no emotional capacity whatsoever.
Yeah.
So I literally always had that like pendulum swing between these two
Mm.
men. And so this like belief that men are useless is one that I'm really having to work through. And not only have I seen it in my outside relationships, but I've also like heavily criticized my inner masculine, believing him to be useless when he's not productive,
Yeah.
because on top of mum saying that to me, like I would be like, Mum, how was your day? And she'd say to me, oh, yes, it was great. I ticked off this, and this off my list. And so like a successful day was a productive day. And so I think it's really interesting. And I have a huge awareness around like
Yeah.
this pattern.
Yeah.
But it's definitely like come through so many times in my relationships.
Yeah.
And inevitably, I have always been the one to leave those guys. Like the rich, wealthy, emotionally unavailable men, they messed me around.
Yeah.
Right? They couldn't commit. They couldn't hold emotion. They didn't have emotional capacity for someone of my depth
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
And in fact, a lot of them ended up saying that they were intimidated by me, which is really interesting because I was quite
Yeah.
intimidated by them. But but the other guys, the ones that I perceived to be useless, that I would end up in longer term relationships with, inevitably I always left them. And so yeah, I just wanted to put that out there as like this, you know, these subconscious patterns and beliefs and the awareness around it. And maybe you can share some ideas or tips or even coach around that so that the listeners can,
Yeah. No,
yeah.
I absolutely love this topic, and it's one actually if I talk about it on my Instagram page, can sometimes get like heated with people because there's a lot of misconceptions around, the feminine and the masculine. And when people typically hear like the masculinity, it's often that kind of toxic side, like, oh, it's like this controlling man, it's this man, and it's like they're neither or. And like as women, we want men to be a certain way, and we completely crush them down.
Yeah.
And we also, as the feminine is so powerful, and when she's in it, she's leading everything. But it's so subtle that it allows a man to feel like he is actually leading everything because you empower him to lead. You empower him to be the best that he can be, and it's just so beautiful. And I love to think of it as like the feminine is very much like the river, and a healthy masculine man is the river bank. And like when you empower him, he holds it all. And like if you're in your emotions as a woman, he's like, I've got you. I'm holding you. It's so safe. It's so secure. If you're, calm river flowing through, or you're like a raging river, he's kind of like holding it there. And you're like, when you move your banks up higher, I feel so safe right now. And he's like, yeah, gotcha. I've got you.
Mm.
But often what we do is we will kind of, inadvertently criticize men. We like pull them down, and they then start to kind of feel attacked. And then they're like, I don't want to do this, And as women, we're like, I don't need a man. It's protection. We're humans who desire and crave connection.
Mm.
But we've become so hyper independent as women as a protection thing. I don't need any man. If he leaves me, I'm absolutely fine. I've got it all. And often we push men away because men want a purpose. They want to feel needed. They want to feel like they've got a place there. And if we don't give them that place, they inadvertently, it breaks down the relationship because I'm like, what am I doing here?
It's also like
masculine.
nothing for them to work for. Like I think
Yeah,
like men, you know what and okay, obviously we're talking about heterosexual relationships here, so this doesn't
yeah,
apply to all relationships, but I guess we can also talk about the energies of the masculine and feminine. I think I just want to
yeah,
premise that, you know, if there's anyone listening to this that's in a not in a heterosexual relationship, like please don't feel like we're just using this one example, because
yeah.
that's just the context of what I just explained around my relationship and my parents' relationship. But
Mm.
I think we can also liken this to the energies that we both, you know, we carry both within us.
We
Um,
do carry both. Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. And I think that that feeling of like, you know, what are men are like, well, what are we fighting for? Like, what are we protecting? Like, what are we leading? Because if there isn't, they also need
yeah,
to feel like there is something that they are leading and slash protecting. And I remember having
yeah.
this conversation with my best friend who's a man. And I remember this, like we were on an aeroplane going to Bali for our 30th birthdays. We both lived in Singapore. He still lives in Singapore. And we've known each other since we were 4 years old. He's my best friend. And we're on this airplane to Bali for our 30th birthdays. And we were talking about, because we had this conversation earlier, Charlotte, about
Yeah.
like dating in Asia as a white
Hmm.
Western Caucasian woman, or even just in
Yeah,
general as a Caucasian woman, okay, or like a Westerner, let's say, like a
yeah,
non-native Asian woman, so to speak. And you were saying that, you know, in Thailand, it's like the expat men will tend to go for the Asian women, the Thai women, because like the Western women, they're opinionated and they hold them to higher standards and they're not subservient and all the rest of it. And it was the same when I lived in Singapore. And I actually said to you, I started writing a book about all my dating escapades. It's really, really funny. I should actually release it at some point. It's called
good.
Jungle
Yeah,
in the Lion City. And it was just all about my dating experiences. And I remember because my friend, he's always had Singaporean girlfriends. Like ever since he moved to Singapore after university, he always had Singaporean girlfriends. And they love him because he's like a typical British. He's a bit like Hugh Grant vibes. And he's a physio and he's got, you know, he's passionate and interesting. We were on our way to Bali and he was telling me like exactly what you just said around like, he's like, well, this is why I date Asian women, because they let me hold their bags and they let me open the door for them. And I actually feel like I'm needed and I have a purpose as a man in this space. Whereas when I've
yeah,
dated Caucasian women, like I really struggle to like find my purpose in the space. And then he said, as a joke, he went, yeah, well, it all started with the Spice Girls and girl power. And I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure it started with the suffragettes and the voting, but cool. It cracked me right up because I was like, it started way before that.
yeah,
I understood what he was saying. And he actually shared with me on that plane journey that he'd read this article about a couple who the man had been the breadwinner and the wife, you know, the mother, I guess, if you want to talk about it
yeah,
in, I'd quote unquote traditional terms. And then at some point, she then took a job that she really loved, and he became the house husband. And
yeah.
she had said like that she found him less and less attractive, and like their sex life had broken
Mhm.
down. And I guess like she saw him then as like, even though he was doing a really important role in raising their
Yeah,
children, and that's like a full-time job, as most mothers know. Um,
yep.
all mothers know, in fact, that's, well, unless you've got a full-time nanny, but most mothers know this, that actually, like,
Yeah,
I guess she then found the fact that he didn't have a quote unquote purpose, or a reason to lead,
hmm,
even though he was leading in the house with the
yeah,
kids, family, which I think is a very important purpose. Um,
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah, she ended up breaking up with him, and we were just kind of talking about like this role reversal and women becoming really independent. And obviously like I'm advocating for women's independence and their liberation and their, you know, forging the path that feels right for you, and that looks so different to everybody.
yeah,
But I guess it does come at a detrimental cost, to the point when we're over independent or hyper
yeah,
independent, which comes more from a trauma response, like
yeah,
the beliefs that I explained I took from my mum,
yeah.
rather than like I am independent and I
It's the
also
and. Yeah,
love to be in this relationship and let my man lead,
mhm.
or
Yeah.
my
It is that
partner.
and energy. It's like I can totally take care of myself. I can do it all, and it feels so good to allow this beautiful person to take care of me,
Mm.
to trust them to make decisions in this area or to lead in this way or to take care of me or protect me in this way. I can do it. But oh, it feels so good just to trust this incredible person to
Mm.
do some of those things as well. And like how free I don't have to do it all.
Yeah.
Like I have my own bags, but oh, it feels so nice that he's just offered and he's just taken that and just done that
Yeah.
because he wants to, because he cares, not because he doesn't see me as incapable, because he cares and he wants to do that. And in his relationships, it's like it's elevating men, and like our language is so powerful. And typically, like what we tend to do is it's a criticism. We don't realize it. We think we're expressing our needs, and we are, but it's like I need you to do this. You're not doing this. Can you do this? Rather than just like really kind of praising and elevating them by sharing like when they do something, how it makes you feel in a really positive way. And masculine loves that they're like, yeah, I can do that. Like you're giving them a task in a really positive way. It's like, you know, when you do X, it makes me feel so cared for. And that's ultimately what I want to do. Compared with, I don't feel cared for right now because you're not doing this. Or I don't feel valued right now because you're not doing this. And they're like, it's like then that defensiveness comes up. It's like I'm being
Yeah. Yeah.
attacked.
Mm.
And it's just, like elevating men in like your feminine energy. And it's true, we have both energies. We have masculine and feminine energies within us. But typically what's happening is we've got these masculine men and women have become very masculine because all that independence and stuff is, the masculine energy. And then we're there as doers. I'm doing it all. No, I'm doing it all. I'm doing it all. And like we're just clashing. It's like being in a workplace and everybody is doing the same role.
Yeah.
You need people doing different roles and sometimes they interchange. Like you might mix. Like the man will go into his feminine when he's nurturing his children, and he will switch into that, but then he then comes out of it for other ways. And we need to kind of just, it's like a flow right now, like same with business. In business, we have to be in our feminine and we need our masculine structures. Otherwise, it's just it's too flowy. It's like a
Mm.
river with no banks to hold it. It's just going everywhere. So we need like that and or, but we can't both be the riverbank. We can't both be like the river. We can interchange at times, but it's like if you're both trying to be the same thing, it's just like that clashing of energy where like, well, I don't feel needed right now, and I don't actually need you, so it doesn't kind of go anywhere.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, we could talk like for another hour on this topic. I think there's a lot of nuance
Yeah.
and a lot of kind of, we need to kind of think about the nuances of different people's relationships and how they grew up. And I think maybe for a lot of men as well, and we are, focused currently on a heterosexual relationship. And again, this is not
Yeah.
like exclusive. This does apply to other forms of
Right.
relationships. I just think we're using this as a current example right now. So please just bear
Right.
that in mind within the context in which you're listening to this or hearing this and receiving this, that it's not personal to people who are not in that kind of relationship. But I think we're just speaking from our own lived
Yeah.
experiences here. And I don't want to speak on behalf of somebody who's in a homosexual relationship or in a pansexual or whatever, because that's not my lived
Mhm.
experience. And I don't want to speak on behalf of that community. I would want someone
Yeah.
to share from their
Yeah.
perspective on that. But I think um men as well, like we've got to remember that's that sense that you said about elevating them. It's like the disappointment that they feel when they don't do the thing that you
Yeah.
want them to do. And I guess that's like that just leads straight back to like mother wounding as well, or even father wounding. Like I always felt like that I was disappointing my dad, and then I was like, well, my dad disappoints me. And it's like, well,
Mhm.
for my partner, it's like, well, the mum, like his mum, it feels like he's disappointing his mum or letting his mum down, or his mum's going to criticize him. And so like if I do go into critical states, they
Yeah.
instantly hears that as like mum. And so I've, again, like you said, like I've really had to work on the language around it. And I really try and
Yeah.
take the time to say, like, even this morning I said to him, like, I really admire how you get up so early every morning to go to work, because I don't think I could do what you're doing. And I really
Yeah.
appreciate that you're waking up this early every morning. And not that long ago, it was like, oh, you're waking up this early and then you're waking up me and then I'm not getting sleep and da, 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 da. And I'm just like, yeah, but you're the one that's having to wake up at silly o'clock. Like,
Yeah.
not even, yes, it's
Yeah.
disturbing my sleep, but you're the one that's up and doing it, and you're actually doing it like every single day. Wow.
Yeah.
I don't think I could do that.
Yeah.
So well done. Like I
And how
kind of,
powerful is that in a relationship? Yeah.
Yeah. And I actually said it to him this morning when he like came to hug me goodbye, because I was like, I really admire that you're getting up every morning and doing this, because I definitely don't think I could do it. And I think just like hearing those little moments really, everyone wants praise, everyone wants to feel validated, and like
Yeah, it's like in a child, like it
yeah, of
wants that praise and that
course.
like you're doing a good job and I love you,
Yeah.
and
And we even talk
you
about
just
that at home. Like there are days, when I've like hung up all the washing and I've emptied the dishwasher and I've done all this stuff in the house. And I would say to him, rather than being like passive aggressive and being like, oh, thanks for doing the washing, Shani, like instead of being
yeah,
passive aggressive, I'll be like, babe, I would really appreciate some appreciation, like for all that I've done
yeah,
for us today. And he's like, oh yeah, you're amazing. Thank you for doing all of that. I do really appreciate it. It is sometimes he won't notice it, of course. So then it's like, it's up to
yeah,
me to say, I would really love some appreciation for what I've done today. And I say that if it's not noticed, and you can't always notice everything that
yeah,
people do. And I think it's just taking those moments. And also like, it's so easy to criticize someone for where they're not at yet. And we
yeah,
try now very much to say to each other, like, I see that you're trying really hard, and I recognize that you
yeah,
find this a real struggle. You find this really difficult, and I see that you're working
mm,
really hard on this, and I'm here to support you. I can't get you to
yeah,
the next level because you have to do that, but I see that you have worked. And he every time I say that to him, he's always like, oh, thanks. I'm really like, thanks for seeing me. Like, I'm really happy that you see what I am
yeah,
doing, not all the things that I'm not doing. And I think that's been,
yeah. And it's true for ourselves as well.
yeah, of course. Well, the reason we
Because I get
criticize
stuck
them
in
is because we're
kind of like,
criticizing ourselves, right? Like,
yeah.
we're
They're
just
like, but I'm
cutting it
not
out.
here yet. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not here still.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
you've moved from here. Yes, you're not quite here yet, but you're not there still. And we
yeah,
focus on the fact, but I'm not here. I want to be here and I'm not here yet. And we beat ourselves up rather than going, yeah, but I was here and now I'm actually, maybe I'm here. And I'm so close. And
yeah,
we forget some of the journey that we've been on because we're not at that final destination point and we just want to shortcut that journey. It's like, yeah, but we need to go for the journey and appreciate the journey and actually praise ourselves for going on the journey. Like, yeah, you're not here at point A, you're partway on the way to like where you want to be. And look at the levels you've already, made. And it's so important to celebrate that within ourselves and empower ourselves to go like, yeah, you've done really well. Yeah, you're not there yet, but like, gosh, look how far you've come.
yeah. And I think it's
Because
so, I
we
think
do,
we all do that, don't we? We all
yeah, we
struggle
pick
to kind of see how far.
mm,
Actually, I said it to you earlier, and I'm going to share it right now because this is the podcast.
yeah,
I said to you earlier when we were on our walk that there's a coach that I love that I follow, and she launched a podcast maybe like 2 weeks ago, and she's already got like 2,500 downloads. And like my podcast has just reached over 1,000 downloads today. Woo!
woohoo!
I know. Let's just take a moment to celebrate that. And I literally said to you on the walk, like, oh, she got like 2,500 downloads in 2 weeks. And I was like, yeah, but she also has like 25,000 people on her
Yeah,
Instagram. She runs a membership. She's been doing this like really intentionally way longer than me. I have a tiny little audience. And yet 1,000 people, or not, maybe not 1,000 people, but like my podcast has had 1,000 plays, like with a small audience. And who knew that when I started this, it would reach that? So like, I just gonna take a moment to celebrate it rather than compare myself to someone who's like way more advanced at me in this game. Um, and has been doing this for way longer than me and has a much larger reach and span than I do. Like, this is cool. Like, that many people
yep,
are interested in what I have to say and my guests have to say. And I just think, like, yeah, we do. We tend to like outsource that and compare it and look at where we haven't gone yet,
yes.
rather than be like, yeah, but wow, look at where a year ago I had this
Yeah.
idea for the podcast, but never did it, never put it out this year. I'm doing it this year because I know there's so much to say and people to get on and juice
Well,
to be had.
yeah. Once upon a time, you had zero downloads. Like, hello.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. All right. Amazing, Charlotte. Thank you so much for coming on today's podcast.
Oh, you're so
As
bad. I loved it.
Yeah, I love having these conversations with amazing women. As I always ask every single one of my guests that comes on my podcast, I'm going to ask you too. What does being a liberated woman mean to you?
For me, it's just like not playing it small, like not limiting yourself by like who you think you should be. Because ultimately, like I believe, like we are pure conscious, we are like absolutely nothing, and but we become all these labels and these attachments, these conditions, and it is like I'm none of those things. And we also then get to decide who we actually are, who we can be, and like what is possible for us. Like I've been told this is what's possible for me, and I'm going to bin that. This is what's going to be possible for me, and I can do that, and I can have that, and I can be that. And just being brave in going, that's what everyone thinks I should be or I should be doing. Actually, I'm going to do this instead because I can, because I want to, and I get to do that. And just that pure like belief in yourself of like, I get to decide. I just think it's really beautiful. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. And like without the limitations, like, you are a single mum and you're still doing the thing. And we spoke about like, you said no to the relationship because it wasn't good for you. And you're also like in this way forging this path for your legacy, which is your daughter.
Yeah.
Now she has a model, available to her of a mother who had the boundaries to say no, and you had the bravery and the courage to move into a new way of being, and she's going to thank you for that one day. And so we're doing this, always I say this, we're not just forging our path to liberation for ourselves, we're doing it to break the chains of our ancestors, and we're doing it for our future legacies. Whether you become a mother or not, you're doing this for your community, your partners, your friends, the society that you live in, and for the collective of women, because no woman is free till we're all free. Like we're all playing our part in this liberation piece. So thank you so much for coming on today, Charlotte. I've posted your socials in the show notes, so if anyone is interested in connecting with Charlotte, you can do so. And when you're listening to this podcast, which will be released in a couple of weeks' time, there will just be a couple of last events left of this year. The final Women's Circle, which is an in-person event, will be on the 10th of December at 7:30 p.m. It will be the final time that we gather as a group of women in this particular space, because things in my life are transitioning, and I will share more on this podcast as things become clearer and more solidified. I will be sharing more about all the exciting things happening in my world in the background. But I would love to come and have you sit there in circle with us for that final event of the year, and for you to keep tuning into this podcast. Thank you so much. Every single person that listens to this podcast, I just like feel you as a human heartbeat, and I really appreciate you listening, reviewing, sharing. Tag me and Charlotte on your Instagram. She's at Charlotte the Relationship Coach. Is that right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you liked this podcast and it resonated and you think a friend needs to hear it, they're going through a breakup or difficult time, or they're just looking for a more conscious relationship, I mean, I wouldn't even talk about like conscious relationships or like, yeah, I shared all the story about how I met my partner, but we can do that in another podcast episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely screenshot this podcast, or if you're watching it on YouTube, screenshot it, post it on your socials and tag us, because we love to celebrate you. For now, have a magical day.